clip here.
So welcome, Dan. Thanks so much for taking time to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really pleased to be here.
And so I want to start with the Buffalo shooting. The U.S. is clearly no stranger to mass shootings, but this one was different. Where did the Buffalo shooter get his inspiration from? And is this an individual act of violence, a homegrown case of domestic terrorism, or is it something different in your view?
I think that's a great question to start our conversation, because I could answer yes to either choice. So in many ways, this seems to be an isolated individual. To our knowledge, at least, he was not directed by an organization. He was not a member of an organization. He was inspired and acting on his own. But like so many recent shooters, he's part of a much broader movement. And so we can fit his actions into what happened in Norway over a decade ago when Anders Behring Breivik killed 77 people who he blamed as responsible for immigration in Norway, among other supposed sins. We could look at the Dylan Roof shooting of a black church in South Carolina that killed 9 parishioners in 2015. We can go on to, as you mentioned, New Zealand and the killing of Muslim worshipers there, Walmart in El Paso. Unfortunately, it's a very, very long list of victims. And they include Muslims, they include Jews, they include, of course, the Black community, and really a wide list that people in the white supremacist community have lumped together as part of a common enemy. And so when we look at the specific action, we don't see it as something that is done by a specific group. On the other hand, when we look at what he's done, it fits a broader pattern that is unfortunately painfully common today and likely to recur in the future.
So the shooter in the manifesto that he put out, he referenced great replacement theory. And I wonder if you might take a moment to just talk about the origins of this and where this argument, even where this premise comes from.
So the specifics of the Great Replacement theory grow out of the writings of a French intellectual who argued that whites and that word is somewhat contested, but whites are being replaced in their own countries through a mix of immigration and lower birth rates. And he was writing about France, and he was particularly concerned about the growth of the Muslim population there and throughout Europe. This shifts to a broader fear that this is a deliberate government plot. And sometimes when you say government, some people insert Jews or other elites and say that people are trying to dilute the white race. And by doing so through immigration, they're doing so through a range of supposed maladies. For example, they would say homosexuality is bad because it discourages white women from having babies. Abortion is bad because it means white women don't have babies. There's a host of things that they're trying to link under this broad umbrella. So this idea kind of takes off in white supremacist circles, and it's referenced very specifically by the New Zealand shooter in 2019, for example. But I would stress, although the Great Replacement gets a lot of attention, white supremacists have been saying, I'm going to say for decades, but perhaps longer, that white people are under attack. They've always justified their action by saying that there are plots afoot to put down whites in the United States in the past. I won't use the words, but it was about, they raised the specter of black rule and that the black community would dominate the white community. And so sometimes this is demographic, sometimes it's social and political, but the Great Replacement is a latest manifestation of a very long series of conspiracy theories that supposedly target the white race.
And with that, I'm going to welcome everybody that might be tuning in to our third and final installment of White Right Terrorism, What We Need to Know our wonderful conversations, informative conversations with Professor James Simmons of Cal State University, Northridge, and the activist community and our community and welfare for decades. Always a pleasure to have you, James, have you back, have you again. Always marvelous.
Yes, yes. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
But it's marvelous being here.
Wonderful. And before we ramp it up today, as always, we acknowledge our ancestors and give our gratitude, express our gratitude for the consciousness of a service for the people, of a service for humanity, of a service in the interests of justice and repair. And we acknowledge that we do this work as African descended people on unceded lands of the First Nations people of this geography. And in the Los Angeles Basin, that is the Tongva people. And I wanted to take a minute today, a literal minute, to hear a bit from Tongva activists themselves and talk about some of their priorities. Just hear their expressions.
With plants is so deep. It has to be reciprocal, right? We have to ask permission before we take anything. We have to offer a gift. We have to let the plant know what it is that we need so that it can help us. And we need to make sure that we don't take too much from any one plant or any one area. The challenge that we as Tongva people and also other California tribal people who do not have a land base, the challenge that we face is the fact that all of the lands that are so key and important to us, that are still natural, belong to somebody. We're not able to access it, at least not without permits or without permission. So that's our challenge, is that there's so many spaces that should be natural, should be kept and allowed to grow the way it's supposed to. And it's being maintained by people who are just—
a little bit of a sloppy cut there, but hopefully the spirit of their work and that particular struggle was clear. And anyone who is joining us, anyone who will log in to join the conversation, please mute your mic if you're not speaking. Please keep your video off when our guest is holding forth and speaking and presenting. Select speaker view to see panelists on your screen. And you can put any questions or comments you have in the chat, raise your hand. And of course, we're going to open it up for discussion if and as folks join us. And good brother Yusuf Desai, do you care to read our frame today and get us on into it?
I can give it a try. It's kind of small.
Small
me,
for you?
I think I can read that. Yes. So let me go for it. White right terrorism in the U.S., historical background and existential threat. The election of Donald Trump was said to embolden white nationalists in the U.S. So-called alt-right leaders appeared with their rank and file grabbing screen time to warn of a coming, quote, civil war, unquote, and present their arguments for establishing an ethno-state. In 2022, we've heard elected legislators and mainstream media pundits echo versions of a great replacement narrative in which non-white immigrant hordes conspire with Jewish elites to displace whites from their rightful position of political and cultural hegemony. These ideas, the ideologies they inhabit, and the varied organizations that represent them are not fragile, fringe, inconsequential, or kooky. Rather, they are an essential part of American political culture. Today, we'll look at the anti-Black terrorism of the civil rights and post-civil rights eras and conclude with an analysis of the white supremacist movement we see today. What we need to know now is that America's #1 domestic terror threat is part of a robust international community that has been reestablishing itself in mainstream Western political life for decades. Some might even say they have risen to political power in some European countries and state legislatures in the United States. So with that, there's our frame, and we'll turn it over to our esteemed guest, Professor James Simmons.
Okay, I appreciate that. I don't know how esteemed I am, but here I am.
We hold you in very high esteem.
Very high esteem.
So,
Okay, yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for that. Not everybody does.
I
Not
feel
these
that.
prosecutors who prosecute people who are trying to make political change.
Right.
Not when I have a boss, not my bosses.
Mm-hmm.
And not those people who consider those who call themselves white civilization chauvinist,
Yeah.
and lower.
White civilization chauvinist. Is that something like a Black identity extremist?
No, that's what the Proud Boys call themselves.
They are. So rather than something the FBI made up,
Yeah, this
it's
is from
it's a self-defined term. Very, very, very interesting.
yes. So, and this is why when there are Black members of the Proud Boys, I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, you know what Western civilization has done
Mhm.
to everyone,
Right.
you know, even Europeans,
Including the Westerners.
Right.
including the Westerners. So,
Right.
Western
Right.
civilization has been a disaster
Mhm.
for Africans. As somebody just asked me, have I seen Wakanda, Black Panther Wakanda? No, and I think I might have said this before. The Wakanda kind of represents what Africa could have been had Africa been left alone.
Mhm.
Yeah, with a little fiction added in.
Yeah.
You know, these fictional mineral, but Africa has all the minerals. If Africa had been allowed to develop naturally and not been raped of its human and natural resources,
Mhm.
the world would be much different, especially for African people.
Yes.
So yes, the Western civilization has been a disaster for whole nations of people wiped out, for
Mhm.
ethnicities wiped out, for the plants, the animals, the sea, life in the sea,
Mm.
Mhm.
the birds in the air. It's been a wreck. Western civilization has been a wreck.
Yeah.
So again, this talk about white and right-wing terrorism. I hope there are people on. I hope that people have questions or comments, good or bad. You know, criticism is cleansing, and if people have criticism about the presentation, please voice them. Not gonna hurt my feelings. If you have something to add, if I make an error, please announce it. I happen to be at the Eastside Cafe with Mestre Timba, who's doing a workshop in Los Angeles. Mestre Timba has been doing Black August for decades. I have tried to follow in his footsteps in terms of presenting Black August to the Capoeira community, since they are both founded in the spirit of resistance. So I'm outside because there's a whole bunch of music and banter going on inside. So please excuse. And I have a little dog right here, like bothering me. So yeah, we kind of left off last time with the terror of Reconstruction. So let me try to pick up where we left off. Yeah. And if I can share the screen.
It's ready for you to do so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll
Thank
stop my share.
All right. So the terrorism of against those active in the civil rights movement, and before I even start that, the presence of lynching against Black people had been started during Reconstruction. Again, Black people were no longer owned, so they were ripe for the terror of lynching. Again, the most horrific deaths you can imagine. But Black people had started to resist. You know, Black people had kind of found themselves in these wars, Spanish-American War, the World War I, World War II, the Korean War. And I don't think it's an accident that the terror of lynching started receding once Black people started coming back from these wars trained by the US military to kill and kill white people. And so, oh, shit, again, we can fight for democracy and freedom here as well as we had in other parts of the world. So the problems that were associated with lynching, as lynching went down, and the civil rights movement was rising, at the same time terrorism, other sorts of terrorism were rising. So here, this was 1950 on Christmas. Harry T. and Harriet Moore were in bed. Former members of the NAACP, when they were pushed out for pushing voter registration a little too hard, for being so-called extreme. But the Ku Klux Klan apparently put a bomb under their bed and blew their house up. This is the newspaper that showed what their house looked like later. I think Harry Moore died immediately, and his wife, I believe, died some days later. But again, this was to be very typical. Again, this is, a lot of people don't even recognize it because they kind of marked the beginning of the civil rights era with the Montgomery bus boycott. But no, these murders, the activity, civil rights activity, had been ongoing, and even to the point there was going to be a march on Washington in the 1940s, and the terrorism that sprang from that started long before the Montgomery bus boycott and those acts of terrorism that we're more familiar with. There were bombings, there were assassinations, and again, trying to achieve political power. In 1964, after the assassination of Medgar Evers, a year after the murder, the terrorist bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, where there were 4 young Black girls murdered, and 2 Black boys later that same day were murdered in the city, were shot and killed. So the bombing was carried out by the Klan. You know, who knows who killed the Black boys? If somebody knows, they haven't told since then. But you have this rising terror. And again, this is not something that's some far-fetched notion that people, extremists have, describing it as terror. So this is the attorney for the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party at the 1964 Democratic National Convention. And what he calls terrorism. Okay, tell me if you can hear it.
On Saturday, August 22nd, America watched this nationally televised hearing.
It is the very terror that these people are living through that is the reason that Negroes aren't voting, that they're kept out of the Democratic Party by the terror of the regular party. And what I want the Credentials Committee to hear is the terror which the regular party uses on the people of Mississippi, which is what Reverend King was explaining, which is what Aaron Henry was explaining, and which is what the next witness will explain, Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer.
Now, in this particular documentary, they didn't include the testimony of Fannie Lou Hamer. But in a separate documentary, well, first, there's a kind of an explanation of the atmosphere in Mississippi at the time, and it wasn't limited to Mississippi, but Mississippi was the worst. And again, some of the types of terrorism are described here.
Saturday, August 22nd, America watched this nationally televised hearing.
It is the very terror.
Actually, this is, let me go back.
I mean, you were just supposed to yell and you started hitting us, so you got off the frustration.
So this is nonviolent civil rights training for activists. But right after, there's a description of what happened in the kind of atmosphere that existed.
Somebody lurches forward, and then everybody begins to lurch forward, so that was even better than we had anticipated.
The students were warned of violence and of the possibility of death once they crossed the Mississippi state line.
It's a little low. James.
First wave of recruits, including 20-year-old Andrew Goodman from New York City, left Saturday, June 20th for Mississippi.
Okay, I thought it was just me.
Goodman rode with veteran civil rights workers.
I'm sorry, that's as high as I can get it.
And Michael Schwerner, age 24. Sunday, June 21st, on Andy Goodman's first day in Mississippi, the three men drove to investigate the burning of a Black Methodist church. The church had been the scene of a civil rights meeting just weeks before. Around 3 o'clock that afternoon, their 1963 blue Ford station wagon was stopped by Deputy Sheriff Cecil Price outside the town of Philadelphia. The three young men were released by Deputy Price around 10:30 that night. It was then that they disappeared. In Oxford, Ohio, volunteers were waiting to travel south.
We had to tell the students what we thought was going on, because if in fact anyone is arrested and then taken out of the jail, then the chances that they're alive is just almost zero. And we had to confront the students with that before they went down, because they now had ball games changed.
So this plight of the civil rights activist was being presented by Fannie Lou Hamer to the Credentials Committee of the National Democratic Convention in 1964. That's a whole nother story that I think is worthwhile trying to digest and understand, and why the political landscape looks as it does even today. A lot of it had to do with 1964. But as Fannie Lou Hamer spoke, she spoke about the terrorism of she spoke about the terrorism that she and others experienced in Mississippi. And President Johnson didn't like the fact that she was talking about it and requested airtime, so the network shifted from her testimony and went to him. But these are the details that she provided to the Credentials Committee.
Mr. Chairman, and to the Credentials Committee. My name is Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, and I live at 626 East Lafayette Street, Rooseville, Mississippi. Sunflower County is the home of Senator James O. Eastman and Senator Simmons. It was the 31st of August in 1962 that 18 of us traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse in Indianola to try to register to become first-class citizens. We was met in Indianola by policemen, highway patrolmen, and they only allowed 2 of us in to take the literacy test at the time. After we had taken this test and started back to Rooseville, we was held up by the city police and the state highway patrolmen and carried back to Indianola, where the bus driver was charged that day with driving a bus the wrong color. After we paid the fine among us, we continued on to Rooseville, and Reverend Jeff Sonny carried me 4 miles in the rural area where I had worked as a timekeeper and sharecropper for 18 years. I was met there by my children that told me the plantation owner was angry because I had gone down, tried to register. After they told me, my husband came and said the plantation owner was raising Cain because I had tried to register. And before he quit talking, the plantation owner came and said, Fannie Lou, do you know, did Pap tell you what I said? And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I mean that if you don't go down and withdraw your registration, you will have to leave. That then if you go down and withdraw, that you still might have to go because we're not ready for that in Mississippi. And I addressed him and told him that I didn't try to register for you. I tried to register for myself. I had to leave that same night. On the 10th of September, 1962, 16 bullets were fired into the home of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Tucker for me. That same night, 2 girls were shot in Louisville, Mississippi. Also, Mr. Joe McDonald's house was shot in. In June the 9th, 1963, I had attended a voter registration workshop, was returning back to Mississippi. 10 of us was traveling by the Continental Trailway bus. When we got to Winona, Mississippi, which is Montgomery County, 4 of the people got off to use the washroom. And 2 of the people to use the restaurant. 2 of the people wanted to use the washroom. The 4 people that had gone in to use the restaurant was ordered out. During this time, I was on the bus. But when I looked through the window and saw they had rushed out, I got off of the bus to see what had happened. And one of the ladies said it was a state highway patrolman and a chief of police ordered us out. I got back on the bus and one of the persons who had used the washroom got back on the bus too. As soon as I was seated on the bus, I saw when they began to get the 5 people in a highway patrolman's car. I stepped off of the bus to see what was happening, and somebody screamed from the car that the fire workers was in and said, get that one there. And when I went to get in the car, when the man told me I was under arrest, he kicked me. I was carried to the county jail and put in the booking room. They left some of the people in the booking room and began to place us in cells. I was placed in a cell with a young woman called Missy Bester Simpson. After I was placed in the cell, I began to hear sounds of licks and screams. I could hear the sounds of licks and horrible screams. And I could hear somebody say, can you say yes, sir, nigga? Can you say yes, sir? And they would say other horrible names. She would say, yes, I can say yes, sir. So I said, she said, I don't know you well enough. They beat her, I don't know how long. After a while, she began to pray and ask God to have mercy on those people. And it wasn't too long before 3 white men came to my cell. One of these men was a state highway patrolman. He asked me where I was from. And I told him Louisville. He said, we're going to check this. They left my cell and it wasn't too long before they came back. He said, you're from Louisville, all right. And he used the first word. He said, we're going to make you wish you was dead. I was carried out of that cell into another cell where they had 2 Negro prisoners. The state highway patrolman ordered the first Negro to take the black jacket. The first Negro prisoner ordered me, by orders from the state highway patrolman, for me to lay down on a bunk bed on my face. And I laid on my face, the first Negro began to beat. And I was beat by the first Negro until he was exhausted. I was holding my hands behind me at that time on the left side because I suffered from polio when I was 6 years old. After the first Negro had beat until he was exhausted, the state highway patrolman ordered the second Negro to take the blackjack. The second Negro began to beat and I began to work my feet. And the state highway patrolman ordered the first Negro had beat to sit on my feet, to keep me from working my feet. I began to scream and one white man got up and began to beat me in the head and tell me to hush. One white man, my dress had worked up high. He walked over and pulled my dress. I pulled my dress down and he pulled my dress back up. I was in jail when Medgar Evers was murdered. All of this is on account of we want to register to become first-class citizens. And if the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off of the hook because our lives be threatened daily, because we want to live as decent human beings in America? Thank you.
Okay. So this kind of terrorism is very seldom called terrorism. When people are shooting into the homes of civilians, when people are torturing people, kind of like on the slave ship, when they just massacred people who were trying to liberate themselves and horribly mutilated them. The same kind of things that happens during lynching. This is terrorism. And I think we really need to start using that language, because a beating, well, you can get a beating as a child. You can get a beating at a nightclub. This was torture. This is torture. So the civil rights movement is littered with examples like this. The murder of Viola Luizzo. Yeah, she was moving a black man for a civil rights action. And you could rightly say that was an assassination. You had Vernon Dahmer from the NAACP. You had a whole list of people who were killed by white terrorists. And one thing that you notice when you look at the record is that there was often an connivance with the local governments and the connivance of the federal government. When the Klan attacked the Freedom Rider buses and set them on fire and beat them up using lead-filled baseball bats, there was an FBI informant with them who was head of security. When Viola Luizzo was assassinated, that same informant put his gun out of the car, pulled the trigger, and then the FBI agent took the gun and hid it. The terror, the smallest infraction by civil rights leaders was harshly prosecuted, if there were any infractions. Sometimes the only infraction is they're trying to get some simple civil rights. But the most heinous crimes, often by white terrorists, right-wing terrorists, often went unpunished or very much delayed. In this episode of Eyes on the Prize, where they talk about the 1964 Democratic Convention, J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, spoke about the role of the FBI in protecting Black people against terrorism. And he said, absolutely not. They haven't and they weren't going to protect people. He said, we're not a police agency. We have no role in this. We're not going to do it. Of course, he had a hatred of Black people and a hatred of civil rights. It moves towards equality. And I'm going to skip today the state terrorism, which is well documented. And maybe some other time we can do that, but the state terrorism, the state of Mississippi, the Sovereignty Commission in Mississippi, the police departments in Mississippi. When Robert F. Williams was fighting the Klan in North Carolina in the early 60s, and they were attacking, Robert F. Williams called the governor because the local police weren't doing anything, of course. And the governor said, "You're not dead yet?" Seemed surprised because he thought he would have been dead now. Both the Klan and the police were attacking. And then he was indicted by Robert Kennedy, who was Attorney General of the United States at the time, and had to flee the country into political exile. But we're not going to talk about that right now. But what we are going to talk about, and I really would like for the discussion to start, are these contemporary terrorist organizations. Again, besides the Klan, these Nazis. Let me see. Yeah. These Nazis who sometimes collaborate with Klan and other white right terrorist organizations. I think probably the three most significant events where there was a collaboration between terrorist organizations was the murder of anti-Klan protesters in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1979, the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017, and the attack, the attempted coup on January 6, 2021 by a massive amount of right-wingers, some of them well armed. So I want to talk about that first, and I don't know what I did with it, but there's the concept of the lone wolf. It's like you can't attack an organization if the person is not attached. Dylann Roof was not attached to any terrorist organization. Timothy McVeigh wasn't attached to any terrorist organization, but they did things, horrific crimes, going into a church and massacring people, going into a grocery store and in Buffalo, New York, and massacring people. Again, the bombing of the Alfred Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. Timothy McVeigh wasn't associated with any particular right-wing organization. He was just like a lone wolf. He had some people with him, but he was a lone wolf. I'm sorry, actually, this is it. So the Oklahoma City bombing, Timothy McVeigh, Terry Nichols, and Michael Fortier bombed it using an improvised explosive device, a term we became familiar with in Iraq. 300 buildings were damaged or destroyed, 168 people dead, including 19 children. And this is like the huge crater and the collapse of the building. Timothy McVeigh was a certified right-wing racist. And He used to sell guns in Arizona at gun shows. He was certainly a terrorist. And because he was a terrorist and attacked a federal building, killed a lot of people, but attacked a federal building, they went out of their way to prosecute him. One of the most extensive investigations in US history. He was convicted and eventually executed. And, you know, part of it was he killed so many people at one time, but also part of it is he attacked a federal building, and that was not tolerable. There was an organization, White Aryan Resistance, out of by Oceanside near San Diego, run by Tom Metzger, who was a Klansman. He advocated this lone wolf theories, again, trying to insulate himself from prosecution, and encouraged this leaderless resistance, even though he was a leader. Eventually, he wasn't convicted of a crime, but the mother of an Ethiopian man who was killed sued Tom Metzger and won, and just basically shut down his organization. Again, sometimes you say by any means necessary. It has been done in Klan murders, where it was in Alabama. The mother of the black man killed by the Klan, sued the Klan and wound up getting its national headquarters because they didn't have any money. But even here in Los Angeles, and it's assumed to be the Ku Klux Klan because they were operating in Fontana at the time. Doverd Howard was shot multiple times while he was on a telephone pole. He was a lineman for Pac Bell. He was paralyzed for life. But it's assumed it was done by the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan assassinated, again, Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney. That wasn't just a murder, it was assassination. Here you see they were investigating terrorism against Black churches, a particular Black church. The first day Goodman was in Mississippi, he was assassinated. The National Socialist Movement. Again, they talk about leader resistance. They talk about Rahowa, the racial holy war. Individual members engage in violent activity. And though they claim they're not into violence, they often promote it, and their members participate in it. The Order, the Silent Brotherhood, right-wing terrorist organization led by Robert Matthews, assassinated a radio host, Alan Berg, did armored car and bank robberies, had gunfights with the police and the FBI. Again, they didn't like the police. And this is why people are, oh my God, they're attacking the police. Why would they do that? I thought they supported the police. No, they don't, normally. They see them as tools of the Jews and protectors of Black people. Matthews died in a shootout with the FBI, and the FBI used its old trick of like, we can't shoot you out, but we'll burn you down, and burned the cabin he was in on the Whidbey Island. John Paul Franklin, a terrorist and serial killer, killed numerous Black men for being seen in public with white women, and also with a sniper attack, didn't kill Vernon Jordan of the Urban League, but severely injured him and paralyzed Larry Flint for life. But his main thing was killing young black men who dated white women. And it just so happened that Vernon Jordan was with a white woman when he was shot. So back to, like, we're coming to contemporary times. The Proud Boys, they call themselves Western civilization chauvinists, right? So are they a terrorist organization? Well, the government of New Zealand says they are. Their participation in the January 6th insurrection would kind of show that they are. They're young men. They like violence. They like to beat people up. They like to assault people, and they assaulted the government. Again, some Proud Boys were present when they attacked the Committee for, or Coalition for Racial Justice in Santa Monica. They were there. And again, one of those who were there, I saw later at Lamert Park, hopefully not scouting out for a mission. The Boogaloo Boys, far-right anti-government group, again, present at the January 6th insurrection, and 2 arrested, again, weapons violations, talk of violence. Now, these people are supposed to be so patriotic and love America, but they have no problems violating the laws of America and trying to turn the clock back. The Oath Keepers, Guardians of the Republic, right? The leader is on trial now for his activities during the attempted coup of January 6th. And they say they're trying to defend the US Constitution and fight tyranny. But as their former spokesman said, and I think he said this in front of Congress, he said they're about selling the revolution. And
It looks like we might have lost James for a minute.
Yeah.
He did say he's at the East Side Cafe. So I'm sure he's going to try to jump back on momentarily.
Yeah.
So we'll look out for him while he's doing that. Welcome, Brother Kwame, Sister Yonk Yam. Glad you could join us.
What's up?
And yeah, I mean, you know, any comments while we're waiting for James? Glad you're here.
Well, one thing that I think is of interest to folk, and again, I do hope that this little series goes out to friends and family who aren't always in conversation about these issues, and aren't, you know, kind of necessarily up on certain issues, but very much understanding the that these folks, many of these organizations live according to a one or another white supremacist mythology, you know, a religious mythology. The identitarians, right, Christian identity folks they've peeked out here and there during the time that Richard Spencer was so visible or whatnot, every now and then you hear, Christian identitarians and identity church and these kinds of things. And
Yes.
so, it's also good for us to understand that how this is cemented in their worldview, and how this is cemented in their belief about what is real and what is true. So it's not just a vying for political power, but it's, God's chosen people, vying to suppress the spawn of Satan, the Jews, and the mud races, us and all the other, people of color. And I think that when we have that understanding and the way, like we talked about, and I think we talked a little bit about it last time, the way that the internet has sealed off these information bubbles and allowed them, within their confines to become so dense and really expand, really intensify, really expand, really, kind of agglomerate a lot of different ideas, that when you are confronting, when you find yourself in confrontation with these folks, we really have to understand that they are seeing you not just, someone who's competing for social benefits or something like that, but as a rival, literally on a biblical level. This is
an existential threat.
An existential threat.
An existential threat to them, a corrosive element to their notion of civilization and all these sorts of things.
And God's civilization and God's, so this is a good versus evil kind of piece there, which there drives many of their activities and their work.
Yes. Well, you see, James is back with us.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
I had to switch devices. But I really would like to get on and talk about, what does all this mean? If we have these organizations, and I think, Tasha, you just mentioned, they don't see you just as some kind of social competitor. You're taking resources, you're taking benefits that they feel that you don't deserve. And sometimes they will defend those benefits, the benefits of whiteness, the wealth generated by whiteness, as a direct challenge to their wealth and as a direct challenge to their rights, and feel that it's okay to terrorize people, including murder, torture, rape, theft, and any other kind of terrorist act that you can think of, because it's all been done in the United States. So I would like to hear what other people have to say.
Can I ask you a quick question? About the last slide that was up. The section on the Proud Boys mentioned an organization called The Base.
Yes.
Familiar with them? Or who's The Base?
Slightly. I think that's kind of like, well, the base, that's what Al-Qaeda means. The base. So they're inspired by, I'm sure, Jewish, anti-Zionist terrorism. And they have conducted activities, but again, they're not a huge organization. I think the attacks on the Klan by COINTELPRO and others, people are not so eager. The attack on the order, Again, it wound up with disaster and a lot of people being put in prison or dying. So, and again, it's like, well, you know, do they get support from the state or not? I said, well, they don't, especially if they're calling the state a Zionist occupied government.
Right.
They pick and choose. They pick and choose. And so they don't, supposedly, as a general rule, they don't like city police. They like sheriffs, you know, and with Villanueva acting a fool, acting like a fascist, you can understand why. They have pretty much the same ideology in terms of rule. The rule of the strongest against the weakest, and to hell with the weakest, the rights of the weakest. Or what's the name? Joe Arpaio from Arizona. He again a straight up fascist who said they compare me to the Ku Klux Klan, and I think it's a favorable comparison.
Right.
You know,
he's being honest about it.
Right.
I can appreciate that.
And I think somebody made a comment before. I think it was in the thing that you read, Yusef. But the collaboration or the influence that white nationalism, white supremacy has in government, local governments. But the president of the United States is a white nationalist. Was. Well, actually, Joe Biden is too. But Donald Trump, he has all but said, I'm a white nationalist. He has articulated the tenets of white nationalism. When he was in Europe and he was in Poland and he started rattling off all these white nationalist talking points, I'm like, what the hell? And I know this Jewish guy, he's like, hey, did you see Donald Trump in his white nationalist speech? I say, yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one who had that reaction because it was so damn clear. He's a white nationalist, you know, and so what? He has a son-in-law who's Jewish. You know, he's just you throw him in a pit in an oven just as quick as he would anybody else.
And you mentioned that Trump in Poland. A lot of conversation has been given to the who is the head of state in Hungary.
Yes.
I can't call his name. I'm sorry, but
I can't.
In terms of the depth of the not only kind of establishing an authoritarian state, but also a kind of a theocracy organized around producing white children.
Yes.
And that's one of one of the main pieces. And so this whole, again, the international character of the Great Replacement narrative, that binds together, and the ways in which this the rightists here and the Republican Party as such has open conversation, with these people, and keeps company and entertains and hosts and brings them on in and have a convention. Didn't he just attend the some great conservative gathering that took place a few months ago?
Yeah, I think CPAC. I think they held CPAC in Hungary at some point. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. They did. They most certainly did.
So an underdeveloped conversation in our community is just that, the international character of this movement,
of the militant white supremacy,
militant white supremacy, and even in our conversations about Ukraine, need to understand who the Ukrainian government is and how white nationalists here and from all over parts, right? We're in what is the word? in conversation with them. That's not the word I'm looking for, but are deeply
Indeed,
networked.
are going to get battlefield experience.
That's
right?
what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Deeply networked with the Azov battalion and, with those forces in Ukraine. I understand not too long ago, this actually may have been over a year ago or over a year ago, hosted the like white nationalist music festival, like all the big white nationalist bands
Mhm.
have their festival in Ukraine.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
American bedfellow.
Well, see, that's real. I'm glad you bring that up, Tasha, because that was a question I had, right? The sort of the cultural infrastructure of these movements. Thinking specifically about the role of the Turner Diaries, right? And as an ideological statement, right? But it's a novel, right? It's a narrative, right? Not a manifesto as such. And so, what that infrastructure looks like, right? So there you're mentioning, right, this music festival. And I do know there's a whole for a while, right, a hardcore punk,
Yeah.
Avowed racist, scene, right? And but that is fairly invisible to the general popular culture, right? It's a very much a niche culture, but at the same time, it's part of, it's the propaganda arm, right, of the movement.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. I said I just had a client who was accused of aggravated assault on a white guy in Lancaster, and the white guy belonged to a group called Antelope Valley Hardcore.
Mm.
And it sounded like a gang to me, but that just the mention of that kind of scared the prosecutor. Like, oh shit, because all the stuff might come out. I didn't find anything too much on Antelope Valley Hardcore other than it was kind of like a music scene.
Mm-hmm.
And looking up the music scene, there was the alleged victim who actually was attacking my client. There was and he's a musician. And there's a man standing next to him with his in a Nazi salute, Sieg Heil.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, oh yeah, we don't know anything about that, and the sheriff's department never did say whether such a thing exists or whether it was racist or not. But Antelope Valley is well known for racist organizations, and that was the other thing. The prison racist organizations coming out of prison, the Aryan Brotherhood, the Nazi lowriders, the Peckerwoods in Texas. There's all kinds of organizations that subscribe to the tenets of white nationalism and are not strangers to murder. So again, what we gonna do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and let
what
me
are we gonna
correct
do?
myself. It's not so much a punk vibe as a hardcore like death metal, right? Heavy
Right.
metal, death metal vibe, right? So yeah, that's more accurate, not punk.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and embrace the name, right? Death metal, right? They're focused on what they're doing, and it's either you or me.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Which is actually a question that I have, James. You were just mentioning some of the organizations. Which, in your estimation, are the most prominent organizations in California / Southern California?
I'm not sure because they tend to run in groups. They, the Klan, they stood out. The National Socialist Movement stood out when they had rallies, but the Proud Boys, they clicked up with what do you call it? The Red Elephants,
Mm-hmm.
The Oath Keepers. I think somebody from the Red Elephants was down with them. I don't know where that little guy comes from. I don't know. But I think that really has to be researched. You know, when there are propaganda statements, you know, these crossing out the women, the Panther women on the Crenshaw mural.
Mhm.
Was it Nazis? Was it Klan? You know, what, you know, do we know? You know, if somebody burns a cross, is that just the Klan or is that a group of people, you know, from different organizations? Just really hard to tell. But I think all around the country, the most dangerous are the lone wolves, the leaderless resistance, the Dylan Roofs, the guy who went in Buffalo and just massacred all those people, you know, old ladies pushing grocery carts, you know, big deal. Those are the leaderless resistance are, I think, the biggest problems. What's his name? Stuart Rhodes from the Oath Keepers. You know, he's on trial. They did their thing, and again, people will probably point to that and say, "See, I told you." They're sitting up there trying to organize, bring weapons into the into DC and doing all this stuff, and they leave a record because that's the tendency of organizations to leave a trail. You know, organizational memory. You know, organization implies more than a few people, and the Oath Keepers supposedly have hundreds and maybe thousands of former military, former law enforcement, and current law enforcement. Some of those arrested at the attempted coup were law enforcement, current law enforcement. But that doesn't. But then when they come to Los Angeles and go to Maxine Waters' office trying to intimidate a member of Congress, they get run off by damn Africa Town and the Revolutionary Communist Party. They get chased away. LAPD said, you don't want to go over there. You know, probably like, oh, there might be some Crips over there. Like the Klansmen got chased away from 6th and Vernon. I think, and you know, he claimed Ku Klux Klan. Don't know if he was Ku Klux Klan or not, but he might have been just a lone wolf and to sympathize with the Klan. Maybe it wasn't an organizational thing. So, you know, hard to tell. Really hard to tell.
Yeah.
But like,
before I jumped in, you had raised the question, James, what are we going to do about it? And that's Yonkiam's question also.
right.
Any
Well,
folks got some recommendations?
yeah, I want to hear what some other people, you know, my position I think is fairly well known. Right.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking about, you know, we do have a I guess you could call it a blueprint for armed self-defense. The problem is that the state doesn't like Black folks to be armed, and so we get attacked. You know, whenever those few instances in recent times, we try to organize people around self-defense. We're targeted, we're surveilled. So it's a difficult position, and we obviously have guns. We just point them in the wrong direction. So if we could figure out, you know, how to get the young cats on the block to, you know, get some proper training and know who the enemy is, we'd be in good shape. We got some soldiers out there. We just have to figure out how to direct that energy in a way that's not self-destructive. My other observation, I was just curious too, because James, you have the SPLC somewhere in your presentation. I did a quick check on them, and they've apparently modified their stance on Black separatism. They're trying to be more nuanced in terms of their approach to that. I haven't said it very carefully. I just skimmed it, but I just wanted to note that too, because they also sort of lump Black nationalism together with white nationalism as hate groups.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's the SPLC has been wrong in the past. Very much wrong. Even the Black Riders, they said, was a Black separatist hate group, and they wanted to kill white babies, and that's a damn lie. The problems I have with the Black Riders have nothing to do with that. They don't advocate that. They never have.
Mhm.
You know, if anything,
Mm.
Taco made one speech and trying to curry favor with somebody said something about white babies dying or something crazy, which was, you know, all that talk is ludicrous.
Mhm.
But I don't think he meant that. The organizational stance isn't that. So yeah, SPLC, yeah, they're going to be wrong. Pretty much every source we have, we got to double check. But the Boogaloo Boys, the Proud Boys, and the Oath Keepers, and other organizations, National Social Movement, what do they call it? I can't remember, Atomwaffen or whatever the hell. Yeah, their stances are well known. It's not like there's a mistake there. You know, the base, that's not a mistake. The Aryan Brotherhood and the Nazi lowriders, those aren't mistakes, you know. So yeah, we have to check our sources. We always have to check our sources. But I don't think they're too far off the mark talking about
I think that's the problem, though. The dilemma is that yes, we have to keep our eye on it. We have to be vigilant, of course, but I mean, the state itself is also white nationalists. I mean, our nation was founded on white nationalists. I mean, so it's a very difficult position we're in. Yes, we have to watch these, you know, armed, vocally, people who vocally express white nationalist ideology, but, you know, we also have the state to contend with that is explicitly white nationalists.
No, of course.
Here.
Yeah, have to. That's why I said we should talk about that at some other time, because that's a whole different fish, or different kind of horse, or whatever you want to say.
Gotcha.
But
well, could I ask one more question? So you mentioned again about the white nationalists who are anti-police, and part of the rationale is that they believe the police protect Black folks.
Yeah,
I'm really puzzled by that position. How do you have any guess as to how they might reach that conclusion? What are they looking at differently that I don't see, or that we don't see?
That we don't see. Well, they arrested Byron De La Beckwith, right, for the murder of Medgar Evers. They arrested, you know, decades after the dirty deed was done, and he was convicted. They arrested, you know, the federal government, you know, the deputized state police and National Guard, even in the South. But if they're lawbreakers, then the police, they don't mind. You know, they rob banks. They, you know, don't touch the property of the capitalist. Oh my God, you got to go to prison, right? They and even though it has been shown that the Aryan Brotherhood had collaborated, and at least up until they killed Hugo Pinel with store-bought knives. Though you can't smuggle a store-bought knife into prison,
right?
The likelihood is very low. It's probably some collaboration, but it remains that if there's an attack, people call the police might arrest one of these terrorists and have them prosecuted. So that's where I think that comes from. You know, the FBI, after the death of J. Edgar Hoover, they can't stop apologizing for him and his dirty deeds. Oh yeah, well that was then, this is now. So now the government is the enemy. So that's the only thing I can think, because, you know, and this is why, you know, people say the government and the Klan go hand in hand, but the Klan to the government is embarrassing. Yeah. You know, we'll kill the Black freedom fighters. You don't have to. You wind up killing civilians, and you kill old ladies and all that kind of stuff. Let us do it, you know, if we're going to do it. And it's an embarrassment for the government. So they reject the Klan rejects them, and these other white nationalists.
Yeah, it also goes to their myths of persecution that they weave and believe, you know. Whereas we're very clear, you know, our lens is clear about how the state is, right, enmeshed with these settler groups, civil society settler groups
Yeah.
that organize, and the way the certain laws are crafted to open the way for specifically like white gun violence,
Mhm.
these kinds of things. They have a vested interest, and their ideologies, their myths are all about how these colored people are getting the one up on them, and they are superseding them politically, and they're taking their positions of power, and they're these kinds of things, getting into these elected positions, and all of these kinds of things that they use as evidence, right, that the state is against them, as part of how they radicalize non-radicalized whites,
Mhm.
that radical position, that I am my citizenship, I have agency with this citizenship, and I'm not beholden to the state. I have the agency to change how the state apparatus works.
Mhm.
And so there's a vested interest in seeing themselves as, and telling the story of persecution from government and law enforcement agencies, despite historical confrontations with the FBI and other kinds of things. So,
Right.
but our lens has much more explanatory force, right? We have a much greater understanding. But one of the things that I think that we really need to be about doing is this thing that we're trying to do today: sit in conversation, create. Our community has to be reinformed about what this threat looks like. Like you all may remember, this was sometime last year, a little young sister got caught up in downtown LA, in the midst of some it was like an anti-vax, pro-Trump, crazy bullshit protest, right? Little sister is in the area, and she takes some photos. Yes, you will remember this. And they surrounded her and started attacking her, and nigger this, and all this and all that. She didn't know where she was. Bottom line, what I mean? She did not know that she was not in a safe place to just film the Trumpsters or the anti-vaxxers, or that, what I'm saying? That you know what I'm saying? So there's that, which we kind of talked about last time. So I'm really just reiterating that loss of collective memory, that loss of collective understanding about how anti-Black violence works, how it works, and what it looks like, and and who it looks like. Particularly, our younger people, our younger people who have often no like viable sense of even what the political violence looked like, the civil rights political violence, what I mean? Who have no sense of the fire hosing. I know I'm not the only person who has had the experience in dealing with young people where they've asked you, did that really happen? You know what I'm saying? Is this a true story? Is this
right?
Looking at something, you know what I'm saying? So there's a whole lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's often presented as like that's the worst thing that happened.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Beating people up on the Pettus Bridge was the worst thing that happened.
Right.
No, when they found Cheney, Goodman, and Swerner, they found other bodies. We don't even know their names.
Right.
I think it was 8 or 10 or 18. Who are those people?
Yeah.
And again, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
And I've been working with gang members for decades at this point. I don't think they're going to save us. Those are some of the most reactionary, the lumping can go either way, right? That was the problem with the Black Panther Party. You got people robbing gas stations and Black Panther Party newspaper trucks. Just foolishness. But how are we going to do it? They can be picked from there. they're going to be fearless, but it's going to take some thought, both for as the anti-terrorist and the counter-terrorist piece. We really have to think about it. You know, what are we going to do, and how are we going to do it, and who's going to do it? You know, the whole who, what, when, where, and why.
So the type of planning, as you were saying, that takes place off a platform like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
To be very serious about it. But that's necessary, and at the very least, so that when we are gathering in the places we gather, like Leimert Park on Sundays and the other Leimert Parks around the country, we at least have an awareness, right, of our vulnerability, even in that moment. And I'm thinking about your comment, Tasha, about our youth lacking that information, but who have also experienced people being taken out, but because it's rarely put in political terms, like called terrorism, as James is pointing out, it's hard to make continue to make those connections, I think, for people. And then again, the information is suppressed. I don't know if it's really common knowledge how many of the leaders of the actions in Ferguson have died under mysterious circumstances, right? Bodies found in cars that have been burned out. And it's just not, that word is not getting out in any kind of, organized and consistent way to make those connections and to show that as political violence, right? And political violence, and that's part of a continuum of political violence.
And this little thing to throw in, as much as we think about group self-defense, there's also walking defensively, in terms of, like I talk to my daughter, all the time about changing habits, transportation habits, travel habits, and try to, kind of guide her into the seriousness of it. But we need to stop going places alone. We need to be sure that we're in groups. We need to know the neighborhoods that we're in and what levels of activity are happening in those neighborhoods, these kinds of precautions, such as it matters, reinvent our travel book, the little travel book we used to have, the where to go and where it's safe and how we do it.
Yeah.
But this is Yotam, but in the what I observe is because of some of us think that we have now become part of the United States. What I mean by that is like integration.
Yep.
So there's this belief that we are Americans. So looking out for each other is not something that it seems, at least to me, that we do very much compared to, let's say, during the civil rights movement.
Absolutely.
Where we looked out for each other, we housed each other, so it is quite complicated because it makes me, I hate to put a negative vibe to it, but it seems as though a lot of us have bought the lie that we're part of the American society. So, I mean, even sometimes people that you will look out for, they will be the one that will throw you under the bus, or they will, put you in harm's way. So I think that's why I think it goes back to what Sister Tasha is saying about we need to re-inform, but also we need to inform like our young people, in fact, who have not been introduced to any of this information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
James, do you have any closing comments for us?
Well, just again to reiterate my position that we need to develop, foster, maintain, encourage, and grow security culture.
Yes.
You know, and that's from a personal standpoint, you know, dealing with crazy people, dealing with gangbangers, dealing with right-wing white terrorists, the gamut, dealing with government. We need security culture, and we need to work on it relentlessly. I know people have been saying it for centuries, but we still need to do it.
It's still relevant and necessary.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Professor James Simmons. This brings us to the conclusion of our three-part conversation with you on the history of white terrorism in the United States, its contemporary manifestations, and even its international aspects. I think it's been great and necessary and really helpful, I hope, right? To anybody who gets a chance to see these recordings, if you watch them later on YouTube, yeah, this feels like some necessary information. So y'all go to the Joko Collective YouTube channel and share the video, like and share the video.
Will do.
Thank you.
And as usual, it's 3 hours. It's like, oh, that's a long time. But then it's done. It's like, damn, that wasn't enough.
Right. That's right. Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. You know,
because there's so much to share.
There's so much to share.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So it's dark out here and it's cold. So
yes.
All right, now
get to where it's warm.
Yes. All right.
Everybody on YouTube, we appreciate you joining us. Look for us again soon. We'll be doing something in December, something on media.
All right. Peace, y'all.
Out.
Peace.
Peace out.
Kwame Yonkiam, thank you for joining us. It is always great to see y'all.
It's great.
And Tasha, are you still there? I know you had to hit
I am.
stems.
Yeah,
Are you going to play that video or?
Well, actually, I thought you were going to end that live. I will play it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think I was, yeah. We're going off live stream now. Or I think I already did. Yes. No.